Before we start the video, a large thank you to Sensitive Pigeon, Chase, Kehoe, Max, and Brooklyn for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Halo Burner for their continued support to the channel this month on Patreon. It is greatly appreciated, my friend, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, and today we're going to handle blocking. So let's start by opening up our damage glider. So right here we have a comment that says check if the target is blocking, so let's go ahead and make a functionality right now to do just that. So in this video we're going to handle passing back and forth all the numbers. We'll get to the visual representation of it in the next video, but in this video we will get everything down, or at least most of the stuff down, for all of the passing back and forth, the numbers and damages and such. So I'm going to call this a check for block function. It's going to be a protected virtual void. It's going to require a character manager, so just like our damage target function. And let's just put it right here under the comment check if target is blocking. So what do we do? Well, just like our damage target function, we want to first check if this target has already been damaged. And if they have, we don't want to proceed with the block because they've already had damage calculated in some capacity, whether that be a block or a parry or just a regular damage or whatever's happened. Something's already happened here, so we can't process any damage on them. So if this character has already been damaged, we return, or we just do nothing or do not proceed with the block. Now what do we do here? So let's make some pseudo code here, because we need to basically determine a direction that the character is standing in respect to the attacking force. And before that even also, we need to check if they're actually blocking. So yeah, the first pseudo code comment here is check if the character being damaged is in fact blocking. And then the second one here is check if the block is, you can use the word valid here, or accepted. And this will be depending on what way they're facing. And to do this, to get what way they're facing in respect to the attacking object, we're going to use a thing called a dot value. And if you're not familiar with what that is, I encourage you to look it up. It's basically going to give us a number. And using this number, we're going to be able to determine if the object is in front of us or not. And we are facing it in the proper way. So we're going to just say apply blocked character damage to target. So check if the target is blocking, check if the blocking is valid, and then apply the damage. So over here in the character network manager, let's make a new network variable for is blocking. And defaultly that is disabled, so false. And then back over here under check for block, we can already just kind of cross out here the first one on the list. So right below that, I'm just going to say if damage target dot character network manager dot is blocking, and we're good. Now we need to make an AND here because we need to actually make sure that the block is valid. So what are we going to do here? Well, let's check the direction using a dot value as I just said. And again, if you don't know what dot values are, I'll show you how we're going to write one out for this particular use, but I encourage you to pause the video and kind of just read about it, read some documentation. It's pretty great for this specific use case. Alright, so first we're going to make a vector3 direction variable. I'm going to call this direction from attack to damage target. That's going to be equal to transform.position, as in the position of this damage glider, minus damage target.transform.position. Next, we're going to get the dot. We're going to call this float dot value from attack to damage target, and we're going to make that equal to a vector3 dot dot, and we're going to pass the direction we just created, and then the transform.forward of the damage target. So this works really great if this is, say, a projectile, but if this is a melee attacker, you want to use the melee attacker's position and not the position of the damage glider, because if the damage glider, for example, is in their hand, you could have some instances where it's kind of going through your character and is thus behind them, and that's not good. So we're going to make a special version of this for melee attacks, where basically we're going to change how we calculate the dot. But more on that in a bit. So now that we have the dot, what do? Well, I'm going to check if the dot is basically greater than a certain value to know if this damage object is in front of me blocking. So I know that from testing 0.3, F is good in this situation. But if you want to basically make some edits yourself, go and print the dot in the console and just kind of play around with it in your project and change that as you need it to be. So next I'm going to say if the character is blocking and they do pass the dot check, we're going to add them to the character's damage list here. Because if you go to the damage target, it says if character's damage contains damage target, return. So we're checking for block first. If they pass the block, they're getting added to the damageable character list, and that means they will not receive damage from the damage target function. So it's just a very, specific order of operations here. Alright, cool. So if they do pass the damage check, they are blocking, what do we do next? Well, we would make a take damage effect, like so. I'm just going to call it take damage effect or take damage or whatever you want to call it, as long as it's very clear what this is. Now we would instantiate this from our world effect manager. Make sure you instantiate it so it's a clone, you're not using the original. And this is where we would get not our take damage effect, but our take blocked damage effect, which does not exist yet. So that is the next step, is to make the take blocked damage effect. So I'm just going to comment out this code for now so it doesn't throw me any crazy error. And let's go over to the project. Let's look where our take damage effect is. And let's go ahead and make a take blocked damage effect. So I'm just going to call this again take blocked damage effect. And we can actually copy a lot of our functionality from take damage, but it is going to differ. But like some base things will be the same. For example, all of our damage types will be identical. We're still going to need to play some video effects, some sound effects. We're going to need to calculate the damage, but the means of how we calculate the damage will be different. So you can see it's going to have a lot of shared logic and especially shared names. So I'm just going to copy all this here and paste this over here after I make it derive from instantiate character effect. And of course, drop in my namespace, delete the start and update function as is per tradition. So now that I have this here, I'm also going to make a create asset menu header. And I'm going to call this take blocked damage. Okay, so let's actually scroll down through here and we can start with the play directional animation. I'm going to call this, change the name of it to play directional based blocking animation. So you can see we have poise damage. We want to actually play a blocking animation depending on the intensity. We don't need to check for a direction, remember, because you always want to be facing the damage to play a blocking animation, so you can't block from the side, etc., etc. So we're always facing forward towards the attacking damage. So let's calculate an intensity, quote unquote, based on our poise damage. So basically, the higher the poise damage, the more intense the attack. So then we're going to play a more intense blocking animation here to match the intensity. Okay, so we want to basically play that animation to match the intensity of the blow. And let's go over now to our world utility manager and our enums. Let's do our enums first. Let's make a new enum. Right below attack type, I'm going to make an enum called damage intensity. So in my project, I like having these values as follows: ping, light, medium, heavy, and colossal. So ping is not actually going to interrupt you in most cases. With a block, it might just subtly, very quickly play a block animation. It's super short. Light is like daggers, medium is standard weapons, heavy is great weapons, and colossal is ultra weapons or really crazy attacks. That's how I like to do it. You don't need that many categories, to be honest with you. I think it's cool to have a lot of difference though in the damage animations. So I like doing this. I find it makes the attacks feel a lot more unique and cooler. So back over here now on the World Utility Manager, let's make a public damage intensity. Get damage intensity based on poise damage. So this is quite simple. We're going to make a damage intensity variable here locally, and we'll start it off at ping. So if nothing is changed, if the poise damage is a flat 0, it's going to be ping, or if it's very low. So then we can return our damage intensity. So what's the first bracket we want? So I'm just going to make a comment above this so we can keep track of this. So we'll say throwing daggers, for example, or small items, like, a rock breaking up the side of you, like a pebble. Now, if the poise damage is, we'll say, greater or equal to, we can begin by saying maybe 10, or even 15, we'll say 10. Then this is going to be damage intensity is equal to damage intensity dot light. So this could be maybe daggers, or very small weapons. Now, then we can jump ahead a bit. You could say, probably for safety here, 30, give daggers a bit of a window. So between 10 and 30, it's going to be daggers, but 30 and over starts being standard weapons. Think of like your straight swords, maybe your spears or maces. And then when you get to, we can say 70 and over, so between 30 and 70 would be standard weapons. You can say heavy weapons. This is going to be your great swords, maybe larger hammers, or maces that you give some kind of crazy poise buff to, or the heavy attacks on a mace. And then when you get to, we'll say 120 or more, that's going to be your colossal damage. That's your ultra great sword charged heavies. That's your crazy boss undersweeping charged attacks. These are going to be the things that typically would send your character flying if they weren't blocked And if they are blocked, you're still going to be knocked back quite a bit. So now under daggers, we can put a slash here: light attacks, standard weapons, medium attacks, great weapons, heavy attacks, ultra weapons, slash colossal attacks. Okay, cool. So we have a barometer now for engaging with some kind of intensity. Now we can use this to actually return an intensity based on the poise damage. So right here, calculate an intensity based on poise damage. We can say damage intensity is equal to world utility manager.instance.get damage intensity based on poise damage, and we pass our poise damage. Awesome. Now what's next? Well, this is very, very simple. We don't need any of this really. So we can delete all of this. We can just use a switch statement, and we can switch our damage intensity, have it autofill here for all of the types, like so. And now we just want to select the damage animation, or declare it rather, based on the damage intensity. So I'm just going to delete all of this old code here from the other take damage effect, and I'm going to just basically declare. And we can take this outside of if poise is broken. You always play a damage animation on the block. So right now we're just going to declare each damage animation here. So if it is a ping, we're going to say the damage animation is equal to a block ping 01. True. Whoops, sorry, we're just declaring the animation. We're not actually playing it. It's my bad. All you need to do is say that the damage animation is equal to block ping 01. And now you could make a list for multiple blocks, which we will do when we get to actually dropping the animations in the next episode. But for now, let's just put one here so we got some values filled in. So if it's light, block light 01. If it's medium, block medium 01. If it's heavy, block heavy 01. If it's colossal, I'm going to call it block colossal 01. Now we don't have these animations actually in the animator right now. I'm just doing this so you can kind of get an idea. But we're still going to actually move on with this effect. And we will test this. But we'll put in the animations in the next video. So let's save that now. And we can make a comment here just so it's very clear to do in the future. If you're two-handing, want to check for that. We want to select our animations from the two-handed blocking pool, not the one-handed blocking pool. All right. Looks good. Now let's save that. What's next? We need to calculate the damage here. And again, it's going to be quite simple, so all these comments can stay for like checking for physical and elemental buffs and yada yada yada. But the one thing that we need to add that's different is absorptions, which we don't have yet. So let's go to our character stats manager real quick. And let's actually make a header for this. So we'll call it blocking absorptions or just absorptions. Probably blocking absorptions specifically because there are armor absorptions in the future too. And let's just make one for every single damage type here. I'm just going to make a public float for each. And I'm going to begin with the keyword blocking. So we know it's different. So blocking physical absorption is not the same as your armor absorption. And we're going to have blocking fire absorption. And then lightning and magic and holy, I believe, are the damage types. Let me check real quick back here. Yes, they are. So let's do one for each damage type. Now, we're basically going to take the damage and we're going to deduct it based on these absorption values. We're going to treat these like percentages. So if the blocking physical absorption is 99, we're going to make an equation that makes it so you block 99% of physical damage. So let's do that right now. What do? We're just going to basically edit each damage type. So we're going to say physical damage, and then we're going to say minus equals. So we're subtracting a value here. And the value is going to be physical damage times, then we're going to open up some brackets, character.characterStatsManager.physical damage absorption. And I see we don't have the stat manager variable, so let's go make that. So let's go to the character manager. Let's make a public but hide inspector because we don't need to see it. Variable for character stats manager. We're going to call it character stats manager. I'm going to get it on a wake by saying character stats manager is equal to get component character stats manager, because again it should be on the same game object as my manager, as my character manager, to be super specific. Okay, looks good. Now let's jump back over to the block damage here and finish our statement. So we're going to say physical damage minus equals brackets, physical damage times more brackets, character.characterStatsManager.blocking physical absorption divided by 100. So for example, you have 90 divided by 100, it's going to be 0.9. And then physical damage times 0.9 is 90% of the original physical damage. You minus equals that in the original, and that's your total physical damage blocked. Do the same thing for your other elemental types, and then you pass them like you normally would, and then you're basically good to go. So this basically should work here now. Let's go to the play damage VFX. So let's erase that. Let's make a comment here for our next video. We're going to get video effects based on the blocking weapon. So if you want to have like wooden splinters play for a wooden shield, you could do that. Sparks play for a metal shield, you could do that. Then you want to do the same thing here for the sound effects. Let's erase this. And you want to get blocking sound effects depending on the shield. I suppose you could also get some too depending on the attacking weapon if you really felt like it. But a wooden shield will play some, wooden thud noises. Metal shield will play kind of like an iron bounce or a steel bouncing noise or a block noise. Whatever you want to do here, make it your own. We'll do that in the next video. Let's go over to the effects now, the instant effects. Let's make our take blocked damage effect. So I'm just going to go to create effect here, take block damage effect, and I'm going to just name that take block damage effect. Let's go to World Character Manager here, and we want to drop this into static effects. And if you're like me and haven't updated Unity, you're probably gonna get that error in the inspector. Just click away and click back on the prefab, it'll go away. And then go to the World Character Effects Manager script. Let's make a public take blocked damage effect called take block damage effect. And now we can jump back. Let's drag this in before we go actually to the variable. And now we can jump back to the damage collider where we wrote this oh so long ago. And then uncomment it out. We can say take block damage effect is equal to world character effects manager.instance instantiate take blocked damage effect. I'm just going to rename it to take damage effect. Or what did I call some down here so we can just copy? I think I call it take damage. Or damage effect was probably it. So let's go down here, and yes I did, so I can pretty much copy a lot of this right now, even including contact point, honestly, because we can use that too when we're actually instantiating some kind of visual effects if we choose to do so. So I'll copy that like that as well. Alright, cool. So what's next? Well, we can put process effect here too for now. That doesn't hurt, but we're going to change a few things. So let's just check this out. We're now applying the block damage to our target, so we can put a comment there so it's very clear that we're doing that. Cool, good stuff. Let's go over here now into the melee weapon damage collider, and what I'm going to do is override check for block. Now, I'm going to show you a way you could do this, but I'm going to show you the way I do it because it's just preference. Now, you could just basically copy all of this here and then paste it in check for block, and why we're doing this is because you don't want to check for the position of the object when you're blocking a melee attacker. You want to check for their position in regards to where you're standing, so the character causing damage. This is because, like I said earlier, if their damage collider goes inside your character somehow, then it could get a wrong position, and it could treat it as if the collider is kind of behind you. You don't want that. You want to always measure based on their position. So if they're standing in front of you and you're facing them, you want it to be a block. Otherwise, it'll feel really weird if it's not. So this is where you can make it to check for weapon reflection. So let's say you're one-handing a spear, for example, you hit a great shield, it's going to bounce off. This is where you want to do that. We're going to cover it in the future, but if you want to go ahead and make that system yourself, this is where I would personally insert it. So yeah, it's a nice little challenge for some people who want to do that. I'm going to save that now, and let's go back over to the melee weapon damage collider again. Right at the bottom, I am going to make a comment here, send blocking damage server RPC, just like we do with our damage target server RPC. We're going to handle that in the next video as well. I just want to get the logic out here now to show that it is indeed working, but we test stuff in the network all the time, so if we forget to, I'm sure we'll catch it. But just to make sure I don't, also I'm going to make a copied version of the melee one here, the damage target one rather. I'm just going to comment it out so we will see it. Alright, so there are quite literally dozens of ways, if not thousands of ways to do this, but I'm going to show you how I separate my blocking functions so I'm not having to rewrite the same functionality too much, because you will get in edge cases where you want to change them slightly if you have a lot of different kinds of enemies and attacks. So the undead hand damage collider is a melee attack, but it has its own damage collider. It's not a melee damage collider because it doesn't need to be. That would be using logic that if I made it a melee damage collider, it would just have a bunch of logic we'd never use. So I could copy the check for block right here from the melee weapon damage collider, but now that's two places I have to edit this logic if I want to change how I'm determining blocking melee damage attacks. I don't like that. So I don't like doing that. I like having the ability to change all my logic in one place if possible. So you can see the only thing that separates us here really is how we're calculating the dot, right? So let's go ahead and work with that, and let's delete this check for block override here. We don't need it anymore. let's go back to the damage collider and let's just make a local variable or local variables here for the dot product. So let's make a header for, I can just call this block, and let's place our vector3 direction variable up here and then our float dot product value up here as local variables that we can use on all damage colliders. And now instead of declaring the dot here, we could just make a function. So I'm going to call it get blocked dot values. And then we can just make it so, I'm going to call it get blocking dot values. We can just make it so this function is overrideable. So we can make it virtual. Let's make it require a damage target. And then we can just overwrite this function depending on the damage collider type. So this is just one thing change. It's very simple. And it's not actually interfering with a lot of the core logic. So you don't need to do this. You could just like copy and paste the function in a few different damage collider scripts and edit it there. But it's just more likely that you will make a mistake than if you forget to edit it in one particular place. So I'm just going to make the default values here, get the position from the damage collider, and then I'm going to make it override on the melee and undead and make it get the position from the character. So erase the check for block here, and honestly now that we have this, we could erase check for block in its entirety. We don't need to override it anymore. And instead, we just override the method at which we check for it. So override get blocking dot values. And again, we're still going to have to override the blocking function in some cases. It's just how it's got to be. You can try to make these kinds of projects as simple as possible. When they're so large, you're going to have to make special functionality somewhere. So I'm going to make these protected so we can actually use them, the variables. And yeah, that looks good. So next, I'm going to just save that now. I'm going to copy this. I'm also going to apply it to the undead hand damage collider because we don't have a character causing damage. We have an undead character. I'm going to swap out that variable for this. It's the exact same thing, really. It has the exact same kind of use case. I'm going to save that. Now, over here on the TakeBlockDamage, I'm going to make a debug message.log called hit was blocked just to show that we made it here. And then just for fun too, I'm going to just compare the damage before and after. I'm going to go to calculate damage, and I'm just going to make a debug message here before the damage is actually changed via the absorption. And we're going to say original physical damage, and then we can just pass the physical damage variable here before we've actually altered it. And then we can get the final physical damage by coming all the way down here after we've altered it, and we can say final physical damage. And then we can just equal that to, again, the physical damage variable. So if I jump into the project here, you can see it does work. I'm blocking it, but let's try it again. I'll show you how to run through it. So I'm going to set my blocking physical damage absorption. I'm going to tick is blocking. I'm going to lock onto my undead and make sure I'm facing him. And then I'm just going to let him swing here. All right, let's pause that and see what's going on. So we have the hit was blocked. Cool. We have the physical damage is equal to 25. That's the original. And we have the final physical damage is equal to 0. So you can see that's all going through. It's trying to get me to play an animation which doesn't exist. So I'm getting an error, and I'm also locked into a state where I can't really move as I normally would be able to now. But yeah, that is all working as intended, guys. So there you go. In the next video, we're going to make it so we're going to change our blocking animations depending on the weapon that you hold. So we're going to get into also setting up different weapon controllers that override your animations. We're going to play the blocking animations and do the sound effects and maybe the video effects as well. And then if we have time, we're going to go over all the blocking functionality and simplify it further one more time and set up our server RPCs and all that stuff. So I greatly encourage you now, before next week comes and I make the next episode, go ahead and try to implement the blocking animations and the effects on your own. And here's some hints. You want to basically have a weapon that you're using that you keep track of. And when you're attacking, you want to switch the weapon that you're using to this weapon. And when you're blocking, you want to switch the weapon that you're using to the blocking weapon. And this is in turn going to determine how you're going to animate your blocking. If you want to take it a step forward, you can switch your animator override controller depending on what weapon you're using. So for example, if you're holding in your hand a straight sword, but in your offhand is a shield, then while you're normally moving about, you're going to use the animator controller of the straight sword. But when you're blocking, you might want to use the animator controller of the shield. Likewise, when you're done blocking, you can return to the straight sword. Now this is a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of stuff to attempt. And this is a good way to really just build some confidence and just to try some stuff on your own. And if it doesn't work out, that's totally okay, because next week you have a solution. So go ahead, back up your project and just really try to do that. It's some great practice. It's a great expansive system, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts. Really cool. Just take some time to think about it and give it a try. Thank you very much for joining me again this weekend. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. A special thank you to my patrons, as always. It is because of each and every one of you I get to keep doing this. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Alright guys, have a good weekend. See you later.